And accept him.
Look on.
When he comes live, I'll do it.
Are we not?
You are, yes. I'm not.
I am, but you're not. I've got to pour my tea. This is very important. You can't have tea time without tea. There's nobody on anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. Just pouring my tea, and we're waiting for Landon to join us. So, yeah, excellent, perfect timing. Tom Kelly has joined us. Julie Emerson has joined us. My therapist apparently has joined us, and I don't have one. Valentina Tintori. Valentina, how are you? Yes, thank you, Julie. I know you hear me. You're supposed to hear me. We're waiting for Landon. Zhang sent a request to be in the live video. I'm not sure if that's possible. Naomi is here as well. I think Naomi's been here for more of these than I have. I don't know who that is, but I'm going to give him a wave. There, a wave. I hope you've all got a cup of tea there. How is it possible that Landon can be late? I suppose that's eminently possible, really, if you think about it. Well, I'm just going to sit here and drink my tea, chat to the rest of you. I'm going to wave at some of you. I don't even know what that means. Where is Landon Metz? Did he think it was 4:30?
I think he knows it's 3:30.
Maybe his clock, his watch isn't working.
There must be a lot of traffic, someone said.
There must be a lot of traffic. Greetings, Earthlings. Oh, I like that one. Is that from the planet Zargon? What type of tea? It's Yorkshire Gold English breakfast tea. The best in the world.
You're just gonna have to do your stand-up routine.
I can't do it twice. Can Sean tell a filthy joke? No, my mother would never forgive me.
Definitely not, Jeffrey.
I'm not allowed to do that. I love some of these names from people's, whatever their account things are.
Handles.
Handles, whatever their handles are. And I'd be embarrassed to go through life with some of these. Honey Badger. Honey Badger.
Oh, there's Landon.
Oh my God, there's Landon. Is Landon in the house?
Oh, I added him.
All right, we're trying to find him. Bear with us. It's not called waiting for Landon Metz. There he is. The man.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Sean?
I'm all right. Have you made yourself? Oh, you have. Well done. Good chap. What is it? Green tea.
Green tea, matcha.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. I've just got my Yorkshire English Gold.
Sounds great.
But I've got a Pantone mug for it, so I'm feeling a little party. How lucky are you? Where did you get green tea? Do you make it yourself?
I do. I have it ordered from matcha.com and I make it every day.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
That's very good. You're looking very spiffing there. Has summer arrived wherever In your living room?
In my living room in New York,
You
definitely. Yeah.
let it in through the window?
Yeah, exactly. Are you upstate?
We are upstate. Yep.
Cool.
We're upstate. We've been up here for almost 12 weeks.
Wow.
And if anybody had told me, at the beginning of the year that I'd be locked up in a single spot with my entire family for 12 weeks, I would have told them that that would be physically impossible because there'd have been a murder by now, but we've managed so far.
You've survived.
Thus far. But, it's getting a bit old at this point, I have to say. How are you doing?
We're good. I've been essentially in my apartment since like the first week of March. So we're fine. We started leaving about 10 days ago for little walks and drives here and there. But other than that, I've just been inside.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And how is Ez doing?
He's good. He's going down for a nap right now.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go and deal with that, do you? Because we'll lose you.
I know. It was great to talk with you, Sean.
But
Have a good day.
How old is Ez now? He's 11 months?
He's almost 15 months. He'll be
Oh my
15 months
God.
in like 2
That's
weeks.
so fast.
I know. It's
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, he's over a year.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Flies by. So how have you been managing during this period if you haven't been able to get to the studio?
No, I haven't. I haven't really been working at all in a way. It feels forced somehow, if that makes sense. There's this kind of...
Well, enforced.
Yeah, I mean, sure. But like, how do I say this? Like, there's obviously the trauma that we're all dealing with of going through this like collective pandemic, but also culturally, it feels like everything's up in the air at the moment. And getting into the studio, the logistics of just leaving my apartment and getting to the studio seem kind of ridiculous. Well, they have up until kind of this week, but B, also just like, I don't know, the context for creating work right now feels vague. I guess that's the easiest way of putting it. So I haven't felt like it was the right moment to run back into the studio and work.
What do you mean by it feels fake? I mean, in a way, in a lot of conversations we've been having with artists, we've been conjecturing and talking about how actually in many respects artists are the perfect people for the moment because being in the studio is a form of self-isolation. So
Sure.
you're better equipped for the moment than a lot of us are. But I mean, do you feel it's appropriate to be thinking about that now? You just can't concentrate, or you're distracted, or what?
I think like from a social pragmatic level, I felt a certain responsibility for just staying home, at least up until recently. I think now that June's around the corner and things seem to have taken, at least for the time being, a bit of a positive turn, I feel excited and very, very creatively activated and charged to get back into the studio. But up until now, I haven't felt that way at all, actually. It's been the opposite. I felt it was, part of my social duty to stay home. So from that point of view, yeah, for sure. There was like a social aspect to it. But then also just culturally, like there's going to be a pretty hard line before and after from this, and I feel like it seems like a massive challenge to consider making relevant work while this is happening. I think the whole society is up in the air right now. And so I'm just kind of waiting.
Is that something that you're alone in, or are you talking to a lot of friends and fellow artists who are feeling the same way?
Definitely, it seems to be a form of consensus. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for everyone, but it does come up in conversation quite a bit right now, which is just that a lot of things that felt, even things that felt, let's say, responsible before, may seem irresponsible moving forward. So
Right.
I just think there is a lot on the table right now that wasn't on the table before. There are a lot of conversations and concerns, social, economic, environmental, all these things. But then also just like very fundamentally, what is and isn't relevant in this new culture, because we don't really know what that culture looks like.
Or comfortable or right, in a way.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. So there is, like you say, comfortable or right. There's like a social duty element, there's like a pragmatism element, but then there's also a creative and like a form of conversation. I think that collective discourse has been put on pause.
And do you sort of have a sense of anticipation that when this moment has passed, there'll be like the dam will burst, and that you'll feel very creative,
Oh, for sure.
Or do you think it's going to be difficult to get back?
No, I miss it very much. I mean, like I say, it's hard for me to speak for other artists, but I personally feel that my studio is not just a place to, let's say, like embody physically the practice, but also like it's a place to dissect the world, to process data and information for both from my life and from my surroundings. And so without having access to that, like that processing time, just as a person, emotionally, psychologically, I find, I mean, that's been the biggest struggle actually, is just, I feel like I'm accumulating right now, and there hasn't been the proper time to digest and transform.
So you're ingesting, not yet digesting.
Oh, fuck yeah. It's the best way of saying it. And unfortunately, I think that, to be honest, that's just the only thing we can do right now. I think, patience is it's all we have at the moment.
We have a very good question from Anne, who said, "How are you passing the time?"
Yeah, I mean, I have a 15-month-old. Did you hear that part?
That's only 10 hours a day, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, passing the time has not felt like a challenge whatsoever.
Are you reading a lot or listening to music a lot? What are you doing?
Definitely listening to music. I started reading this book earlier, actually, like in the winter time I was reading. It's called Renoir, My Father by Renoir's son, who was a filmmaker. It felt very pertinent to my life, I guess, being an artist and having a kid. And there's something very romantic and charming about his son remembering these final days with his father. And it's a very beautiful and it's a very earnest book, but
I've got to say, I think that his son was a better filmmaker than his father was a painter. That's the only comment I'd like to make on that particular.
Have you read this book? It's very cinematic. I mean, it feels as though it was made for a film.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful book. But yeah, so I will say again, and almost to the same, in the same regard to making work, there's something alienating about reading about, let's say a daily quotidian existence right now. It feels very strange to read about someone just enjoying food in the south of France or whatever, like doing a thing that felt normalized to them or normal to them. It feels very foreign and alien at the moment. So reading about that has felt challenging. And I think also reading art text has also been very strange, because to the same regard, it feels almost irrelevant right now. I don't know what I'm trying to process yet.
I think everybody that I'm talking to is feeling incredibly overloaded by the amount of information coming out of the art world in terms of virtual this and virtual that and virtual the other. And I increasingly find that, I mean, I read a lot anyway, as you know, but I've been going back and rereading books and reading books from different periods, just to kind of almost access a different feel. So I just finished reading a book, this morning that was from 1973, and it felt like, which I lived through, but it felt like a time capsule. It was fantastic.
Cool.
But I'm feeling like I have to hide from the internet a little bit at the moment. Are you feeling that, or is it still present?
Definitely. No, I actually took the New Yorker and New York Times off my phone. It was becoming unhealthy. I was obsessively checking the news every day for, I guess, some form of some positive information, but it just wasn't necessarily coming. So yeah, for sure. I mean, I think in the early stages of quarantine, I was definitely online a lot more than I have been, for sure. But yeah, I mean, there has been obviously like a lot of data being thrown at us. That's, like you say, I think the human mind, the human condition wants solutions. It wants to find a problem and chew on it and find a resolution or a way out. And I think that has been particularly challenging during quarantine or during the pandemic, because there's not necessarily a solution that we can find right now, at least not as normal people. All we can really do is wait, which I think is, it's not necessarily what the mind wants.
And we just had a question, which is a sort of follow-up to the conversation we started with, which is, how do you think the quarantine period will affect your work when you get back into the studio? Do you think there are going to be changes? Oh,
for sure, definitely. And like I kind of keep, not to beat a dead horse, but I think I'm just waiting for some for the doors to reopen just a little bit, which I have to admit, it feels as though they are, just like as a society, to get a sense of like the kinds of conversations and the run-ins. I mean, the beautiful thing about being in New York is seeing people that you know all the time. And I think having maybe a few accidental encounters on the street, running into friends, having conversations, even just seeing what people are wearing, how people move, what the energy and the spirit is like, all those things will definitely impact the work. And I think it's really, I mean, it's like fully impossible to say what that will be now.
So I have a question for you, and it's something I sincerely actually want to ask you about, because you've talked about this before, and I want to ask you if you can define it for us further. You're somebody that is a painter, but you've talked about how important the work of Marcel Duchamp is for you.
Right.
And I wondered if you could square that circle and make that connection and explain how Duchamp particularly is important for you as a painter.
Sure. Well, okay. There's a very long-winded answer to that question, obviously, but I will say, to try and condense as quickly as possible, what I'm interested in as a person and as an artist is, let's say, a way of looking with a certain sort of simplicity, I guess you could say. It's looking at things with a certain sort of awareness and acknowledgement of the sort of the mechanics of the way things are and operate on their own terms. And that's both like implemented, the subject and object merge in the work in that sense, where it's just the impetus to use dye and raw canvas comes from this place of seeing how these two sort of disparate materials operate on their own terms. It's not paint, it's not a secondary surface. There's sort of merging, right? So there's an allowance for a relinquishing of control and a sort of a relinquishing of authorship beyond my own intentions to these sort of the inherent properties of these materials. But that also continues in the way the image and the object is broken, the sort of like implication of the viewer and that gesture.
You've answered this question before, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and so the way that the image and the object are split, there's an implication of the viewer and sort of automated phenomenological event that's happening in the eyes of the person, similar to watching a film. I'm looking at one of my paintings right now. And again, the way the objects relate to one another serially and implied architecture of the space, blah, blah, blah. Essentially what I'm getting at is that there is a lot of questions around the self, the role of the artist, and the sort of ecology, the ecosystem of both creating art and exhibiting art and experiencing art. And so all of that to be said, obviously Duchamp was a very important figure in just laying out the groundwork for something that was inherent in all art before Duchamp, which was essentially that posterity does not belong to the artist. In a sense, the work itself, once it leaves the studio, takes on a different life, and it belongs to society. So there's a relationship, right? There's a bridge that's being gapped. There's a divide that's being bridged between the work and a culture. And once that consensus is formed, it no longer belongs to the person who made it. Can I ask you about
the seriality in your work? Because it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting reference that, you could regard the seriality of your work almost like, frames in a film.
Sure, definitely.
Of them shuttering through, and you're prepared to expand and contract the conversation by limiting the number of frames. Do you see them as having that sort of serial filmic quality?
100%. I mean, I think the initial, let's say, logic or rationale or impetus for working serially is something that was coming from actually a Duchampian point of view, which is there's this gesture, and painting historically carries the most weight in regard to like human gesture. It's very simple. A person was alive and they used a thing and they touched a thing. So there's this very, very one-to-one relationship of human gesture there. But again, like I say, I'm interested in mechanics and ecosystems. So the way those forms are used serially implies not necessarily like a deconstruction of the hierarchies, but it implies a certain sort of infinitude these could have been made X amount of times. So there's a certain relinquishing of power or control, let's say, of the significance of the human gesture, and it becomes something else. So it's about letting go of this control of the role of the artist in that ecosystem, and sort of letting the work start to bleed. There's like a peripheral vision, and so that seriality comes to life in installation, because it's dealing with these sort of inherent gestures to the architecture, to the space. So it's like a vacuum, right? It's like sucking the world into it.
Yeah, I wanted to actually talk to you about architecture, because I know architecture is incredibly important in terms of the way in which your work can function. And, you know, for a younger artist, it's interesting to me that reference in your work very much, you know, I felt it very much relates to the way that an arte povera artist would seek out sight and install it in a very specific way. I mean, obviously in your work, it's from an American perspective, it's not carrying that historical context in the same way. And it's a little bit more neutral, but it always engages the architecture.
Definitely. Well,
can you talk about the relationship to architecture?
Yeah, again, it's the same thing. It's the same notion, right? It's about looking for these inherent qualities, whether it's the way the materials function, whether it's the way the image and the object function, whether it's the way the works relate to one another serially, or whether it's the way the works are engaged in both accentuate sort of natural properties of the environment that they're shown in. So the architecture itself, it becomes gestural in that sense. It's dictating the way the works move and engage with the space, but the works aren't necessarily changing the architecture. They're acknowledging these sort of subtleties that are already inherent to the space.
So we had a fabulous question about 3 minutes ago, but it wasn't the right place to insert it. Brooklyn Gin just joined us. Can we get you as a sponsor, please? It wasn't the right place to insert it. But Valentina Tintori, and I'm going to mangle this, Valentina, so I apologize in advance. I'm trying to get the gist of it and remember it. But Valentina asked a fabulous question. She asked, we're in a moment where nature is taking a break from us.
Yeah.
And which is like a brilliant observation, I think. And how is that going to show up, you know, as somebody who is very much engaged with taking forms and inspiration from nature, how do you imagine that this moment of nature getting some respite from us, which I love that concept, is going to impact or make itself evident in your work?
Again, it's so hard to say what will or will not happen moving forward. I think clearly our relationship to nature as a society is going to change, obviously. I think even it's just like what's happened what did happen in Wuhan or what's happening in Venice, the like immediate result of lack of human movement and how quickly the environment starts to heal. I mean, I don't know if we necessarily knew that it was so quick prior to this, you know, just even a few days actually makes a massive difference.
We've talked about this and I'm with you in spirit, but the reality is that within, you know, a week or 10 days of all human movement being ceased in Venice, dolphins reappeared in the Grand Canal,
and swans,
which is great.
Yeah.
And in the north of India, they were able to see the Himalayas for the first time in decades. But then the salutary part of that is the observation that scientists have made that if we continued doing this for 33 years, the upper environment would start to heal itself. I mean,
right.
We don't have that kind of time, so we've got to be more proactive.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, what the responsibility is as an artist or in the art world, I mean, those are pretty big conversations. I'm not really sure that I have answers for those right now, but I do think obviously the relationship that humans have to their environment will be changed after this indefinitely. I hope.
Yeah.
I mean, we can hope. I don't know.
There's a great question here, actually. Somebody's saying, I need to ask, the works I see made during the lockdown have been some of the best made during a tough time. They seem so personal, loaded with emotion. Are you urging or maybe urged to create during these times? I mean, I think it's an interesting question. The only thing I would take issue with is I don't think we're really seeing work yet
No.
that is impacted by the moment. And I wonder whether we will. I was talking with a journalist yesterday about this, and they made the observation that, really there are no great artworks that come out of moments like this. There
I
are
agree.
memorable artworks from the Spanish flu or the Black Death or the bubonic plague,
I
which
agree.
don't exist. The high moments tend to be at different times, but it's an interesting question.
It is. I mean, again, this kind of brings up points we've already covered, but I think my studio, well, I should answer that question outright. I actually haven't made anything. So the works that person has been seeing were made prior to quarantine. So that was the sort of last.
Well, they're
body.
not yours.
I found them. No, I made those works and shipped them to Italy just before locking down. They just kind of slipped under the rug at the very minute. Slipped out the door at the last minute. But so yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense there was a certain awareness. I mean, I knew I was shutting the studio down relatively soon. I didn't know exactly how extreme things would get, at least in New York. So yeah, they weren't made in quarantine, and they were made with a very vague awareness of what was coming. So to answer that question, no, I don't know. Who
Okay,
knows?
so I want to ask you some very quick questions. I want very quick answers to them, because at some point you're going to have to go and relieve Hannah and
Sure.
take over with Ez, so that she can have some downtime as well. So here we go. You didn't answer this earlier. What music are you listening to right now?
Oh, I mean, I've been making a lot of mixes, actually. That's one thing I can do with my hands while I'm hanging out with Ez all day. So I've been listening to a lot of like Northern African guitar music and like solo piano works, cello works. And then also some really interesting music has been kind of actually released during quarantine. Charlie XCX, an artist from London and Los Angeles, made a record about quarantine. That's actually quite fascinating.
Hang on, what was the name?
Charlie XCX. People won't know who that is.
Okay.
I do.
The record's really good. It came out in quarantine. It's about quarantine, and it's actually to your previous point, Sean. It's challenging to be creative in this moment, and to hear something that I think aptly, captures the spirit or feeling that feels like it resonates with people in a very short window. That record does it. At least for me, it's an interesting piece of history, I think.
Okay, if you were not an artist, what would you be?
Oh my God, I don't know. A wanderer.
A flaneur. I think
A flaneur.
I think that is exactly what you would be. You would be
I
a
mean,
flaneur.
Sean, I almost said that, but I was like, I don't know if that's insulting. I didn't know if I should admit that.
You wouldn't insult yourself, would you? I mean,
100% a flaneur. Yeah, I don't know that I'm not already.
if you had as little hair as I do, what hairstyle would you adopt?
Definitely yours.
Well, take the hat off. Send me the hat and the pigtails, and we'll switch for the next time we do this and see how we look. If you were stuck on a desert island, what meal would you be craving?
100% New York pizza. That's been like the one thing. I mean, I don't even have to pretend because like I've essentially been on an island. The one thing I miss more than anything is New York pizza. Have you not been able to order in? We didn't order in for the first 2 months, or like the first 6.5 weeks. We didn't order in at all. Only groceries, and I was very, very.
Who was doing the cooking?
We would mix it up. So I always do breakfast, and then one of us does lunch, and then Hannah usually does dinner.
And do you know where the dishwasher is?
Definitely to the right.
Because I don't know if you watched last week or not, but I was accused of not knowing where the dishwasher is. So I just want to check if I'm going to get you back up.
No, 100% pizza. Saragina, Roberta's. I mean, those are.
Oh, he's frozen on the notion of pizza. He froze. There you are. So back to the desert island. What artwork would you take with you? Can't be your own.
Oh wow! From a living artist or any artwork ever?
Anything you want. You can have anything you want.
Oh my God, that's a crazy question because I think there are so many things that you don't really feel they belong to society, so you never think you would have them. You know? Oh my God. I wish I had a second to think about this. I know, I need to think about it. This is such an emotional question. It's like when you're a kid, you walk into the record store and you don't know what to buy, you know?
Okay, which piece of clothing would you take with you?
I guess a pair of jeans because like they're very robust.
Okay. Uh,
Listen. Like the artists that I think about the most are usually from like a European minimalist kind of perspective. So Franz Erhard Walter, Emi Konobo, Blinky Palermo. These are the people that I respect so much. So something in that vein for sure.
okay. Well, that's almost an answer. So I'll give you that. And what book other than the Bible would you take?
To be honest, maybe the Tao Te Ching. It's reliable, it's poetic, it's something you could get something new out of every time you read it.
Especially if you hold it upside down.
Yeah.
All right. Have you got any questions for me?
I don't know. How are you? What are you feeling? What do you think? As someone who is, let's say, responsible for perpetuating culture in a society, what's
Jesus.
important? I know.
Am I responsible for that on my own? Because that's quite a big order. If I have.
Well, in a way, yes. I mean, your selection of who you choose to work with is perpetuating a culture. It's choosing a valley. I mean, what are your responsibilities moving forward, or do you feel like you even know that?
I have to say that's a super interesting point, and I have to say in this moment, I feel really good about my choices of the artists that I work with, because I think that everybody in the gallery, almost without exception, that I've been in touch with on a regular basis or we're talking to, is really doing a brilliant job of coping with the moment and figuring out how they can function in the moment as an artist, even if it's by being abstemious, right?
Sure.
But I think everybody's doing a really good job of figuring that out. And I think that our responsibility as the gallery is to make sure that we're there and intact for you guys when we all emerge from this. And that's why, it's incredibly important to me that my colleagues at the gallery are all looked after and protected, because that is the culture of the gallery. And it is something that's taken 30 years to build up, that we've invested so much in. And I want to make sure that when we emerge out of our shells, the world may be different, but we'll still be there with the same standards and values.
Of course.
And so, hopefully we can pick up and not do things the same, do things differently. I've actually written an op-ed piece for Art News, which will be coming out soon.
Cool.
That talks about this and challenges us all to emerge into the light, rather more conscious of our behavior, perhaps. So I guess those are the things that I think about the most.
I think there's like a certain tenderness that everyone's feeling, and I think moving forward without being socially responsible isn't really an option. I think everyone's feeling that collectively.
Yeah. Well, I suspect that you and Hannah are feeling it rather more than a lot of other people, because when you have a 15-month-old in a moment like this, you have to really think about tenderness and being kind. So because it's going to be their planet, we're bequeathing them a mess. So we've got to figure out how we clean up a bit of it before we shuffle off this mortal coil. And on that happy note.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in person. It's been a long time.
I know, it's been great to check in with you, and I think it is very interesting that you haven't gone to the studio, but you've actually been thinking about the return to the studio in a very particular way. And I have to say, I'm really fascinated as to how that will impact the work when you get back into the studio, because I don't see you as sitting there doing nothing. I think you're sitting there thinking about the work in a very particular way,
constantly,
and maybe not executing, but actually it's almost like a sort of Zen activity of preparing to make the mark.
I know.
So I'll be very interested to see what the mark looks like when you emerge.
Oh my God, I know. Well, hopefully there's not a warm-up period.
You have to get a pair of trainers and a tracksuit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I mean, there's going to be a very interesting feeling in my studio when I go back. it feels like a past life in a sense, you know? I mean, I can smell it almost. It's very bizarre. And
But when you go back into the studio, you're not somebody who has studio assistants. You're back in the studio on your own.
I'm going back in
And
solo.
so, it is like an extended form of isolation.
Yeah, for sure.
But you'll be back in the studio.
Well, like I said, though, the studio has been this place of processing data just as a human, in a sense, I think it relates to like how sleep functions in our life to me. You know, it's a place where I can go and retreat from my life in a sense, and almost like turn Landon Metz the person off for a second and deal with everything that's happened in that day or in my life, or move through things. And I think the work is both an emotional release in that sense, but it's also a form of spiritual practice in that sense. And the studio is the place where I get to do that. It's a sanctuary for me, you know?
The Church of Landon.
Sure. Yeah. And, I think I've been doing my best to find ways of seeking that sanctuary from home, but there's nothing like the real deal. And like you say, I have been chewing on the work nonstop. And so those initial pieces when I go back will be something, that's for sure.
All right, so we better keep our eyes trained on those. Everybody's going to want those paintings now.
I know.
The post-isolation paintings, not the isolation paintings, the post-isolation.
I'm just waiting.
Anyway, Landon, it's been great to check in with you, and thanks for joining us. Do post
of course,
the recipe for the green tea matcha, because I love green tea matcha.
Oh, yeah, I will do.
And we'll speak to you very soon. Thanks for taking time out of your contemplation to almost virtually re-enter the world today.
Of course. Thank you, Sean.
Nice to see you.
Likewise.
Say hi to Hannah and Ez for us.
I will. Same to you and the
All right,
family.
take
Okay.
care. Ciao.
Ciao. Bye-bye.